Hey friend, welcome to Healthy with Heather Brown. If you don't know where to start with balancing being healthy and loving the life you already have, I got you, friend. And yes, of course, we're still going to enjoy some Chick-fil-A. I'm here to come alongside you and encourage you to fall more in love with your creator, your spouse, your kids, and your own health journey. We'll talk about how to let your good things grow until they become daily habits, with the occasional dad joke and point of view from my Yankee hubby, Eric. Don't stress. Let's hop on this Hot Mess Express together. So join me, Heather Brown, as we unpack what it looks like to live a life well loved. You know, one of the most popular questions I hear is, how do you do it all? Or, can I pick your brain? And I always laugh because my knee-jerk reaction is, oh girl, I don't do it all. And now I have a way to let you pick my brain about my business. I have an incredible team of women helping me manage my crazy behind the scenes and keeping my life well loved and this podcast running smoothly. Because Lord knows I'd be a hot mess express trying to do it all myself. This year, I launched a course where I finally do a deep dive and share all the raw details about how I built my business and team to where it is today. My COO, Alyssa, and I recorded over 2 hours of video into 9 lessons to create a course that reviewers are saying is unlike anything else out there. Hey, their words, not mine. But hold on, the videos aren't all. I'm going to read you my list of what it includes so I don't forget any of it. There's a 28-page workbook with questions to move you from stuck as a solopreneur to thriving as a team, or even just hiring your first assistant, with smart goals and steps to guide you from point A to point B efficiently. A behind-the-scenes look at our application, hiring process, and critical onboarding process, my cannot-miss first step in hiring a new employee, and how to cultivate a team buy-in. There's a deep dive on my team's inner workings, our operating systems, favorite apps, and index full of time-saving tools we use to keep our team running smoothly. If you're ready to take your business, side hustle, or network marketing lifestyle to the next level and grow a team, I'm your girl. Head to www.mylifewellloved.com/team to grab yours today. Hey, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Healthy with Heather Brown. I am so excited today to talk about one of the things that I absolutely love doing, which is number one, like pouring in and finding cool and unique and creative ways to involve my kids and me with emotional connectedness, and also just finding a way that I actually got into with sensory play because my oldest had a really big issue with picky eating. So as I was stumbling through all the new terms of sensory play and things that dietitians and feeding therapists were throwing at me, I started searching Instagram and Pinterest and trying to find all the ideas of what the heck I should be doing. And then I found today's guest. It is Beth from Days with Gray. And Beth, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So Beth, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do and how the heck did I find you on Instagram?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm Beth, and I was a teacher before I became a parent. And shortly after being pregnant with my second, we moved far away from the school that I taught in for 13 years. So that was pretty tricky. But then, yeah, I became a stay-at-home mom, and you know, they say kids just know what to do. They just know how to play. But yet I had toddlers that, you know, we all just kind of like, we're like, what should we do now? You know, like, do we roll the pine cones down the road a little bit more again? Or, you know, how are we going to spend our time? So, but then I thought, you know what, I actually think I have some input in this, and started Days with Gray blog and Instagram and all the social media at the same time. And it's been amazing. We've connected with so many different families, and sure, we help families, but we've also become friends with so many as well. And it's just sharing this parenting journey.
I love that. So you started Days with Gray in what year? Do you remember?
It's been about 6 years. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it goes by very, very quickly.
Oh my gosh, it really does. I have he's about to turn 7, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so it was so cool to me. I literally just was searching, like I said, sensory play on Instagram, and you came up doing all these fun activities with your boys. And what I loved about what you did, Beth, was you made it be simple things that people more than likely have on hand, or you just need to buy a few things to kind of integrate into that daily play.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a myth that we need like all of the best things for our kids, and that's just not true. We also know that kids like to play with a cardboard box, right? So it's like, what do we have on hand? What can we use that we already have? And what do we see our child already being interested in? And how can we extend that play?
Absolutely. So, Beth, when you first started doing these sensory play ideas with your kids, how did you come up with this stuff? And where do you live? Did you involve neighbors? I'd love to just hear a little bit about how you started all this and then how it led into Days with Gray.
Yeah, well, when I was a teacher, I came from more of a traditional public school. So I had to really learn a lot about early childhood. And I fell into the idea of loose parts, which are basically just everyday objects that children create with, but don't necessarily have a start or a finish. It's not like start here, end here. Okay, now you're done. But they really evolve into their own thinking, and that kind of extended into getting some wooden blocks and magnetic tiles, and watching how my children really took to these materials was just so different than any other toy that we have played with in the past. And so the more I saw them playing with it, the more I realized, wow, this is something that the other people need to know about. This is something that gives me a personal break as a parent. This is something that's helping them problem solve and manipulate and transport and dump and all of those play urges that we call it, that they were able to have through sensory play or through anything that they wanted to do with these loose parts.
So I have to kind of break it down almost a toddler level. I realize that I've just been throwing around the term sensory play. Can you explain to people that are like, what the heck is sensory play? What it is?
Well, sensory play can be so many different things, right? So it's basically anything that touches within our five senses. And the idea is that we're activating our brain very differently than if we're having a conversation with our child, or if we're listening to a lecture, or, us telling our children about something. They're actually getting a chance to touch it, to do it, to smell it. And it's activating their brain to make new neurons in their brain with repetitive play patterns. And so a sensory bin can be something as simple as taking the under the bed storage bin that you have all your tank tops from college in. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I had to dump out.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, I went to college 20 years ago, right? So, I mean, those, they can rotate out, and you can use something that works for you. So one idea is rice. I found very early on that rice and beans were not for me. We used to take our sensory bin into the back porch, and there was, little bean sprouts growing in between all of the cracks in the deck. And I'm fine with that. But I realized those two weren't my favorite to clean up.
Sure.
I realized that something like oats was a lot easier to clean up, and ice and water has really become a go-to favorite because they are very easy to clean up. And the idea is you just put a little in a sensory bin. You put a little in an under the bed storage bin, and the dollar store is your best friend with sensory play because the funnels are incredible. They'll explore so much with that. They're exploring capacity by filling up pitchers and dumping it and pouring and scooping. That's their gross motor skills, which are their big arm muscles. They're pinching little objects, which is their hand muscles, which is going to help with pencil grip. And so a sensory bin is just this all-in-one inclusive activity that will give you a chance to empty the dishwasher or kind of stare out the window as your child is playing, but also really engages children to learn through play.
Yeah. So Beth, what does that look like for you in the beginning? Is it that you set up the bin and then you just expect them to figure it out? Or can you maybe even tell us a little bit about your breakfast invitations? I think people would love to hear about that.
Yeah. So breakfast invitations are a little different than a sensory bin. As far as the sensory bin's concerned, I'd say different kids do take it to different levels, right? And there is a certain training, quote unquote, period that maybe, your 18-month-old might want to, throw what's in the sensory bin. And that's a play urge. They're not doing anything wrong. But if we notice something like that, we're going to maybe move the sensory bin to an outside area. Or we may say, okay, well, for this bin, we keep everything inside. And, we want to set some boundaries. So if you throw it out, okay, you redirect, you remind them where it goes. And then if they throw it out again, you put it together and you say, you know what? You gave it a great try today. Tomorrow, when we take this back out, we're going to remember to keep all of the items in the bin. And it doesn't take long for children to understand that there are certain boundaries and a way to play with sensory bins before they catch on. And
sure.
And over time, then you can change it to, ice and water and colored water. And so that's sensory play. Sensory play is great. What the other idea is something called a breakfast imitation. And this came from when my children were younger, toddlers for sure. And we're still going with my youngest, but when I am not a morning person. And
same, sister, same.
Yeah. It's like, and you have children and you realize, you wake up from them, right? So it's no longer, unless you're disciplined to wake up earlier, but you're waking up to them. And then all of a sudden you're like changing diapers, washing bottles. There's a million demands with being a parent. And that would make me want to just give them a minute or two or, 45 in front of the TV for me to wake up. But I found that when we turned the TV off, everybody was cranky. Like I was cranky because I didn't really have my place yet. They were cranky because they didn't really have a jump start of the day. And I thought, what if we were a little more intentional Monday through Friday? What if on Monday through Friday, they came down to the breakfast table, were invited into a play prompt to do something while I made the breakfast, washed a bottle, drank my hot tea. And it really just soared. And I mentioned it as a joke. I called it a breakfast invitation because I was inviting them to breakfast to play. And it took off. There's so many in the community that also do a breakfast invitation in the morning. And it gives everybody a chance to connect in the morning because you're all in the same room. It gives everyone a chance to be inspired and think about creative play. Because what I noticed is that children would take whatever they were working on in the activity, and then they'd run off with it after breakfast. And so it really just kind of triggered this, okay, oh, wait, that's what we do today. Today we play. And I'm not against any sort of TV. So we just bumped that to later in the afternoon.
Sure.
Which was also helpful. So I knew where my two breaks were. I knew my first break would be after the breakfast invitation because they would go off and play. And my second break would be later on when we would want to do the TV time. So yeah, and we all knew exactly, the routine stays pretty similar Monday through Friday.
Yes. Do you mind talking a little bit about what your screen time looks like with your kids? I know everybody's absolutely different. And I love that what you do allows for lots of women all over the country and dads as well to be empowered to get their kids playing more. That's just, I love, love, love that you do that. So what does y'all's screen time look like in your house?
Well, and just to back up, I think we need to give ourselves a little bit more credit, right? If our kids wake up at 7 and they watch TV at 2, how many hours does that mean that they have been up and playing and having conversation and reading and doing all the things we want them to do? So I like to think about my hours to hour ratio. And then in terms of the TV time, how much, I think that this is per family, and a family needs to make this decision. It will look and feel differently for each family. And I also really feel strongly about if there's a new baby or a big change, that some of this gets extended, right? And you don't feel guilty about it because when everyone's ready to hit restart, we can. But there are some great shows out there. We've gone through watching my children from like 3 to 8. My oldest is 8 now. There are some great, clever things. And I'm not against Bluey for my 5-year-old, So, screen time, you have to make your own decision about screen time. But if you make the decision, you need to know that it's okay if you feel good about it. What your neighbor watches versus what you watch is pretty irrelevant. If your children feel like if your children are able to play on their own, if you're feeling like this is working for you, then it's actually working. You don't have to feel guilty for things that are working.
Absolutely. And do you mind speaking a little bit, Beth, to maybe even what would you say is recommended, I guess? Like, is there something that you've heard either from your teaching background or just with the many years you've now been doing Days with Gray that has really resonated with you as far as things to look for that maybe mean that there's too much screen time or not?
That's a great question. And I know that the AAP has guidelines. I don't know the most recent guidelines. I can personally tell in my children's behavior just whether or not they are a little bit more short-tempered or cranky, if they are crying about the TV. All of these are kind of in my mom brain, that maybe we need to rethink some things. And when we do need to rethink them, it's great to just kind of set that guideline and stay as strong as you can in the first few days when everybody's just upset with you about the change, and know that you'll eventually get over the hump. But in terms of the AAP, I'm not sure what the guidelines they have. I do see that the attention span from using the iPad, we don't have one, but they do use it at my mom's. And I personally do see a difference between how their behavior from watching TV versus their behavior from the iPad with that instant quick stimulation. But again, it works for some children. And so you really have to think about your child and what you're noticing and the difference. Okay, I'm going to back up. The biggest thing that I like to keep in mind is that, am I using screen time as a quick fix? And I really try not to, because I want them to understand how to problem solve and find something to do when they're bored. And if I don't ever give them the practice to do that and always rely on screens, then I'm missing an opportunity for them to, understand how to get over the hump themselves and play. So it really just depends. There are just times that parents need screens, and there's times that maybe we default to it and realize we don't have to as much as we thought we did.
Yes. And I really like the way that you spoke about that, Beth. And I would completely agree that we can tell a lot of times just by their behavior or how they're acting, like, oh, okay, we learned that amount of time was perhaps a little bit too much for this child at this age. Like, whoa, what happened to you? But it's also so wise to be in tune as well with just allowing them to have the creative freedom to figure out what to do when they're bored. I almost feel like people just are aghast that I give my kids quiet time. Leighton, is 7 years old, and I tell him, you don't have to nap like your brother, but typically on school days, because I know he is just so exhausted and he's been so overstimulated all day at school, I'll say, but we are going to have a little quiet time. You can go back in your room. You can play quietly. You can read. You can do whatever you'd like to. But I do just think that unplugged time where he gets to creatively use his brain to entertain himself is really important. I've seen it work really well for him.
Yeah, it really is. It's so neat. Mine are upstairs in their room before bedtime. Then they can turn off their own lights. And that's when I see what you're saying. It's like the things they create when they have that downtime. It's really fascinating. So
it really is.
As long as you're thinking about your ratio in your days and are they having time for both? And, it's up to you.
Yeah, totally. So let me ask you, because it was a hot topic when I asked our audience on the My Life Well Loved Instagram account. When I said Days with Gray was coming, everybody wanted to send in their questions, which made me so excited to see and to bring to you. So I do want to give you some of their questions. One of the big things that listeners wanted to hear from you was your take on healthy eating with kids, because it sounds like, and what I saw on your website was that you also share your family's journey with allergies and different diets. So I'd love to just hear, first of all, your general approach to healthy eating with kids and how allergies factored into that.
Well, I think just like screen time or too much screen time, I also see that maybe different variations of foods also affect their behavior. But food is a tricky subject, right? Sometimes if we have a child that's just, we want our child fed, right? And so we have to keep in mind that we may have our own ideas of the right kind of food as an adult, but we also have to think about, our child eating. I believe strongly in now I'm not saying it's easy, but when you build the routine to take your child grocery shopping, that's a great way to include your child in, we pretty much get the same foods every time we grocery shop. So including the kids, they see all the produce that we're going to add or the fresh fruits and vegetables. And, then we can go down the chips aisle and they can pick one, and we can go down the cookie aisle and they can pick one, but they're also seeing the big variety that we're bringing home.
I love that.
A combination of, more packaged foods and more produce, but the combination. When we had a food allergy, we have to read every single label. And that's because we're looking for not only what the ingredients are, but we're also looking for, the made in the factory, because we can't do any cross-contamination. But with that, it also triggered reading ingredients. And it's amazing when you look at the back of the box and you actually see, what is the food, what is inside. Can I read the ingredients, and
it's quite eye-opening, guys.
It is.
Whoa.
And sometimes we all need an Oreo or we want an Oreo. There's no hard...
Double stuff for me, please.
Yeah, exactly. There's no judgment in it. But when you actually are looking at all of the foods you're eating and reading, that's pretty eye-opening. So in that way, the food allergy has helped us open our eyes into seeing like what kinds of foods we're putting into our body.
So true. Now, you said something that I do want to have you touch on. You said that you have really worked on building a routine of bringing your kids to the grocery store with you. Do you have any general either rules or ways that you teach your kids how to behave in the grocery store?
I was a stay-at-home mom that worked at home on days with Gray, but so that was, we like got paid on Wednesday, and Wednesday was grocery shopping, and so that was how we also filled our time. That was what we did on Wednesdays. And so since they started and progressed, they just kind of, they were in the cart. I'm also not against snacking on something as you're grocery shopping. Now you're still going to pay for it when you get there, but as long as, nobody's telling you you're not supposed to do, I'm a fan of that. So that
are you in the South?
Yes.
I thought you were. Where are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm in Atlanta.
Okay, so Publix typically gives your kids a free cookie while you're walking down the aisles. I don't know if that sugar is helping you or hurting you as you go through them, but they do give that free cookie.
And there's so many things you can do. A banana, there's those Peter Rabbit pouches that was always popular for us. So that's the first thing. The second is there's a Melissa and Doug shopping cart, and now to put that in the trunk every time was absolutely just. You have to laugh that you're even doing this, but it really helped my oldest because he also would follow along, and it gave him a job to do, and it gave him a task. Now my third, there's some things about birth order. My third, would be really great. And then he'd like race up and down the aisle. So, it's definitely temperaments, but getting them in the routine of just, going around the perimeter of the grocery store and including them in what you're buying really, really does help.
Oh, I love that. Those are really great tips. I'm excited to share those with everybody. And the next question that I got was somebody asked dinner idea for a picky 3-year-old. He's our foster kid.
So what has worked the best for us is using a cutting board. And so taco night is great because taco night is just, you just chop down spinach all the way down, and then you just chop down tomatoes all the way down, and you do a row of cheese, you do a row of avocado, and we have a very colorful board, and then it's up to them to make their own taco. And that helps with picky eaters because they have some decisions and they have some choice in the matter. And so that would be one, that's a go-to for us when we do that. Another go-to is to allow them to pick a night. My kids love Annie's boxed mac and cheese. So they know, if like a babysitter is feeding them dinner, that's our go-to. If you have to say yes to some of the things that they pick as well, even if it's like pancakes for dinner, that really helps.
Absolutely.
And the same goes for snacking. Like, if you just cut up some fresh vegetables or something, and then you just walk away and that's it. You just walk away.
Yeah.
A lot of times they just see food and they're just going to pick at it.
That's so true. And I feel like a lot of times so I have written a busy mom's meal planning ebook for picky eaters because I have just walked this journey for so many years with our oldest. And one of the things that I learned is what you're saying exactly, is that if you put stuff out, number one, you just want the exposure over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that we learned from the dietitian was even if your child isn't willing to eat something on their dinner plate, even just for, my 3 and 4-year-old at the time, I would say, well, let's just pick up the carrot and kiss it goodbye. Yeah. And it's so wild that like we're talking about sensory play, like even just him getting used to touching those textures that he wasn't super comfortable with, that was a step in the right direction. Now this kid eats carrots like a freaking rabbit, which is great, but it is those little itty bitty steps. So I'll link in the show notes. It's mylifewellloved.com/meal planning ebook. And I do have all the tips from our dietitian in there as well. And the next question that we got was, can you give us some fun ways to encourage them to make healthy choices for themselves?
So it's just funny thinking about all the years, right? We used to do this thing called a double snack. And so it would be, it's this little Sistema container and it had 2 sections. And so you can get, it's at 10 o'clock. And still today they're like, it's 10 o'clock. Can I have my 10 o'clock snack? And you're like, oh my gosh.
I love it.
Routines really do stick, but they'd have to get something from the fridge and something from the cabinet, and then they can have a double snack. And so that worked really well to get both of them in.
And then do you have some favorite healthy snacks for picky eaters? That was another question that we got. I love your idea about the refrigerator and the pantry. That's awesome.
So the other thing that's kind of a running joke, and I don't even know how it started, but apples and carrots are always available. And so now apples and carrots do have sugar, and it's not that it should be eaten in an unlimited amount, but that was something that we set up, and the amount of apples that we still go through and carrots through today. It's hilarious. And now, the kids, they all meet for bike club and they go biking after school. And, my kids pack this little mini backpack, this REI little mini backpack full of like green and red apples, because they go to this corner and it's like their bike club rest stop, and my kids hand everybody apples. So it's just funny how little habits like that can catch on. And these kids who never eat apples are all eating apples, and their parents are just laughing because they're like, they never eat an apple at home. So
that is so cute. Funny. I love that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going a little bit, this is back to my own personal question, because I'm just curious. Now that you have kids that are a little bit older, how do you see almost the benefits of your sensory play and your breakfast invitations play out? Like, I love that story about the apples. Is there anything else you've seen?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing of what I notice is that when you get to grade school, it's a lot more, remember the flashcards or memorizing words, right? So now when kids are in their force and motion unit and they're like, oh, the word gravity, right? And so now they have to learn the word gravity. They have so much in the back of their memory that they've already touched. They've played with race cars down a ramp. They've, for capacity, right? You're going to learn the term capacity, but they've already poured and scooped the water. They've already filled. We have this little sensory bin that is a clear container with a piece of duct tape on all different levels. And you have to pour to the lines, it's called. So that's helping them pour milk down the road, right? Because they're strengthening their arm. But at the same time, they're holding a steady hand. And so now when they're learning these terms in grade school, they have so much that they can fall back to. And children need repetition in their play. They have to play that same thing over and over again. They're reading the books this over and over again. And it's because every time they go back to it, they're building like another little branch in their brain that's extending from the idea. And so sensory bins are a great way, and art also, those are great ways to stimulate the brain, but then also start these repetitive play patterns that will lead to bigger concepts once they get to grade school.
That's so awesome to hear.
Foundation.
Yes, that's amazing to hear. And so I hope that serves as encouragement to all you mamas that are listening to keep doing those breakfast invitations and to include sensory play. Beth, I know that you're running out of time because you got to go pick up your little, but I am going to ask you the last question that I ask everybody on the show. And that is, what is your favorite thing in your health journey right now that's making you feel like you right now?
Yeah, making time for myself with, two things. One, still putting my 5-year-old in the stroller and going for a walk. It's one of my favorite things that I've done with my children throughout the years because we have the best conversations and we live in a very hilly neighborhood. And I feel awesome when I pull back into the neighborhood. And the other thing is I joined a tennis league in our neighborhood, and that checks off buckets because now I'm socializing with people I wouldn't have normally done that with. I'm learning a new sport. So it's great for my brain rather than getting bored with the same old thing. So
that's awesome. No, I love that. And I'm with you. Like those walks with my babies, those are some of my favorite memories. I'm going to be so sad when we get rid of our last stroller. I'm hanging on as long as I can.
Oh man, I pass on the strollers to the neighborhood and every time I walk home with tears, and I'm not even a real, it's not typical for me, but yeah, it's just, you're just passing on like a season of your life, You are. Well, Beth, will you tell everybody where they can find your products and tell them what you sell in your store and where they can find you on Instagram one more time? Yeah, I'm at Days with Grey. So it's GREY, and it's on Instagram. It's on Pinterest, Facebook, dayswithgrey.com. You can find everything you need. And if you are a subscriber, you actually get free activities to your inbox every Monday and Wednesday at 7 a.m.
Oh my gosh, you guys, you need to jump on that ASAP. And I will link her website, her Instagram, and also I'll link your email sign up and you'll send it to me too so that they can hop in there. But thank you so much, Beth, for joining me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Heather.
Yes. So as you guys just heard, Days with Grey is one of my favorite Instagram accounts to follow. I have followed her for years now. She is incredible. She's a 13-year veteran teacher. She has a master's in education. So I'm really thankful as a mama of 3. She has brought so much of a wealth of knowledge to us today. So if you are really interested in doing about some of the activities and things we talked about with Beth today, I actually have included a lot of activities to do with your kids that are related to the holidays in my holiday planner. So I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about it by now. If you go to mylifewellloved.com/ebooks, you can grab my holiday planner and use code podcast to get 15% off. I include things in there like free resources for kids with October and November ideas of things to do with your kids, like our Boo Basket that we do every year. It's a really fun tradition we do with our neighbors, Bible verses to memorize with your kids, coloring sheets, traditions to do for Christmas. It is so much fun and things that we adore doing as a family. So if you listen to this episode, please make sure to screenshot it, share it on your stories, tag me in Days with Gray, and let us know what you're doing with your kids today. Have a great day. If y'all think I'm a little crazy, just wait till my favorite guest joins me in the Marriage Corner. It's my hubby, Eric. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage Corner, which I have recently heard from you girls is perhaps maybe one of your favorite parts of the podcast. So, Eric, how does that feel?
Surprising, for one. But I do love the Marriage Corner.
It's a lot of fun.
It's one of my favorite parts of the podcast.
Imagine that. Well, I'm really glad that you guys are loving Eric as much as I do. Well, obviously not quite as much as I do, but that actually reminds me, Eric, do you remember when we were in college and we were about to get engaged and your mom literally got into a mini argument with me at the lake about who loved you more, me as your fiance or her as your mom?
I do vaguely remember that.
Super round.
Try to block it out of my memory.
But I was like, yeah, now being a mom, I'm like, I could see where she was coming from. But at the time I was like, what? That's crazy. Sue is always good for some good conversation.
Different kinds of love, but yes,
for sure.
That was an interesting conversation.
No doubt. So, Eric, this episode that we did was with Days with Gray, and she's the one who kind of inspired me to start what Leighton affectionately calls his tivities, which means sensory activity. And it's actually one of my favorite things that we did during Leighton's preschool years, where we would either have a sensory bin out with kinetic sand, which you probably didn't love, chalk, which you also probably didn't love.
Oh, man, I cannot stand the sidewalk chalk. Back patio, like I don't mind the driveway, but oh my gosh, and it never cleans off as easy as you expect either. So, but anyways, I understand the sensory play is very important, but oh man, all that dust, the kids tracking it in. It's also my type A personality a little bit. No
doubt. I think one time we actually got out or a babysitter maybe got out the chalk with Leighton right after you had finished power washing the patio, and that really set you off.
Holy smokes.
Good stuff. Anyway, so we obviously love sensory activities in the Brown household, and luckily Eric's a good sport usually about letting me get the boys messy as long as I take it outside. But it really is just so great for their emotional growth, for their physical growth, and also just for learning to connect those dots like we were talking about on that episode. And I really treasure that time with the boys. They're some of my favorite pictures and videos that I have, like I said, from Leighton's preschool years. So with all that said, we actually got a question submitted for us to tackle today. So I'm going to read it to you guys. Thank you so much to Blair for sending it in, who actually coincidentally has our same last name. Sure, we're not related, but anyway. So thank you, Blair. Her message says, newly married here. How do you, quote unquote, become one, but still have time to yourself without guilt?
Do you want to answer it first, or do you want me to kind of talk about it?
Oh, I want you to start with it. Yeah.
So I do think this is a very good question, especially being newly married. I know it's difficult to find that balance. I would actually say this is probably one of the most difficult things to figure out early on in marriage, but also it's something that I feel like can kind of easily get out of balance as you progress in your marriage, whether you have kids or you don't have kids. But I really think it's one of the things that we talk about a lot, where communication is key to between you and your spouse to try and find that balance. We always talk about, and we've said this before, I always want what's best for you, and you always want what's best for me. But we also have the same goal of that we want what's best for each other, and that's more important than, us individually. But having said that,
which, let me pause you there and say Eric is really good at reminding me of that even in the hard. So I really appreciate that about you. Like, even if we're having a harder discussion, you will sometimes kind of bring a little bit more perspective by saying, Heather, I just want you to know at the end of the day, I really do want what's best for you. And I know that you want what's best for me. So let's try to look through that lens as we're having this discussion. So I actually think that that's a huge breakthrough that I've had as you've brought that into our conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think, that's part of the perspective of being in a marriage. But the fact of the matter is, each person in a relationship is their own individual person. And you never want, you kind of talk about, you hear people talk about, changing the person they're in a relationship with, whether it's their spouse or not. And I just could not disagree with that kind of thought process any more than you could disagree with that. I think it's very important for each person in a relationship to realize what each person's strengths are. Each person is different, and it's important for each spouse to encourage each person's, I would say, their strengths, or what, excites them or what motivates them. Those are all very important things. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that. And a lot of times I think it can be very easy to become a victim in a relationship a little bit.
Ooh, explain what you mean by that.
I just think it's very easy for sometimes they want people to feel sorry for the other person. And that's a very common human characteristic as well too. But it's important for each person to be confident in themselves, and it's important for each person in the relationship to encourage one another. And that's one of the things that I just am so grateful for you, is that you're always encouraging me to do things that motivate me, that make me feel like I'm a better husband. Whether that's going to the gym and working out, maybe that's going to the golf course for a half hour and hitting some golf balls, meeting up with a friend after work just to reconnect. I want all those same things for you as well too. And it's really about self-confidence. In that question, they mentioned, like, how do you not feel guilty about it? And guilt is a huge thing, but it's just really important it's kind of hard to explain, but you have to be confident in yourself. And if you're confident in yourself and you're always communicating, you're going to get out of balance with your spouse. And you'd be like, just talk to them, hey, I really want what's best for you, and sometimes they can go too far down one route of being too independent, or sometimes they're maybe too dependent. And you have to talk about that and come to that agreement. And sometimes you have to have difficult conversations about those priorities, but those conversations are so important, and why I think it's so important to not be afraid to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that one thing that Eric and I always talk about is how when we have date nights, that really is a great opportunity for us to be able to talk about where we feel like we're either in balance or out of balance. And even maybe, for me, sometimes I feel like it's a blind spot that I don't realize how hard I'm running me and the boys or the family or whatever. And so I feel like Eric has a really good opportunity when date nights are there and we can both be sitting there and like getting on the same page, or like on Sundays when we sit down with the calendar and figure out what's going on. That really allows for each person to maybe even say, like, kind of like what we talked about in the meal planning episode, which I can link that down below. But you really do need to communicate your needs to your spouse. It's not selfish to tell your spouse what you need. I can tell when, at this point in our marriage, when Eric's getting stressed or overwhelmed, and I'll realize, hey, it's been a while since he has had some time as an introvert just to go and like be outside and be in nature and be by himself. And so I'll say, like, hey, babe, why don't you figure out if on Friday you can go to the golf course that day? Or I feel like you realize that with me, like, hey, Heather, you actually haven't gone out with your girlfriends in a while. Are y'all wanting to do something? Or,
well, I think it's important to ask, your spouse, because you'll ask me a lot. Hey, Eric, this upcoming Saturday, is it okay if I meet up with some girlfriends? And, more times than not, that's not a big deal at all. And, it works both ways. I'll ask you, hey, Heather, can I go do this? Can I go do that? And you can't be afraid. And it kind of goes back to what you originally said at the beginning, or what we said at the beginning, which is, as long as you want what's best for your spouse, I feel like that kind of gets over the guilt. As long as each person wants what's best for the spouse, it's really easy. It's really easy not to feel guilty about asking to do things for yourself, I believe. However, having said that, if you're in a relationship where only one person maybe wants what is best for the other person, then you can get out of balance very quickly. And I encourage you to have a conversation and try and figure out what may be the issue or the sticking point in your relationship. And that can be a very difficult conversation. And a lot of times people can become defensive, but it's really about how you approach that conversation. If you are the one that wants what is best for the other spouse, I think you lead with that. You say, hey, you know, I want what's best for you, and I want you to be honest with me and communicate what you want, what you need in this relationship, and I want to do the same for you. And if you're able to do that and your spouse is able to be open to that and have an honest conversation, I think that is key to a healthy relationship and also not feeling guilty, because I think guilt comes a lot with not communicating. Guilt is what's deep down inside of you. But if you're able to talk through it and verbalize it, that guilt will wash away. Even
when it's hard. Actually, it's interesting with the back to school season. We were talking with one of the teachers at our school, and we were talking about how, God actually, all of us are sinners. We all have, sin in our lives and what have you, but how, God really appreciates when we come to him with our mistakes and we fess up to it and we confess our sin. And then he not only forgives it, but he quickly forgets it. It's blotted away. And so in marriage, obviously, marriage is a picture of how Christ loves the church. So even though I think even for women, it might be harder to let go of things maybe than what it is for men naturally. But when one of the teachers said that, I was like, oh, that's such a good reminder just in general for what forgiveness should truly look like, that it's you forgive and you forget, just like how, thank God, he sent Jesus on the cross to die and blot those sins out for us.
And not just say you forget and not just say that you forgive, but to actually mean it. And sometimes that does take a little bit of time. And I think early on in our relationship, it was very easy to say, I forgive you, but deep down, sometimes it's more difficult to actually forgive. It's easy to say, it's hard to actually do. And sometimes it just takes time and it takes prayer to kind of let those emotions and those feelings work through you. So obviously sincerity is very important in any relationship, but that has a lot to do with maturing in your relationship and communicating with one another, and a lot of difficult conversations.
Yeah. And I would say that even if you guys could sit down once a week and just kind of talk about your priorities for the week, it's really helpful. So Eric will typically say to me, hey, I've got Friday off and I haven't been to the golf course for a while. Do you care if I go ahead and go on Friday? And I feel like you're really good at trying to not be tit for tat, where it's well, you went out with the girls on Friday night, so I'm going to go do blah, blah, blah. I feel like we've really worked throughout our marriage of not acting that way. But in general, I also know that Eric has an expectation that he's communicated to me that I will not overbook us as a family and or as a couple. So in general, we're aiming for about a date night every week or two. And then I would say I would be pretty happy if I got a girls' night or a lunch out or, a workout class together or whatever the case may be, and coffee, once every 3 weeks. It's not like I'm saying I need it every week. I'm just realizing for me as an extrovert, I feel more whole and complete when I get to have that great community with my people.
Yeah, and when you're doing the things that motivate you, that make you feel good, that make you feel independent, a lot of times that's going to transition back into your relationship as well too. You're going to have a newfound energy. I'm always appreciative of you when you say, yeah, go do this, go do that. And I think it makes us grow closer together. So there should be no guilt. But what you said as well, too, it's so important not to keep score and think to yourself, oh, I let her do this, or, oh, I let him do this, so now I get mine. That's not what it's about. It's about being honest with each other, communicating, and just honestly wanting what is best for your spouse. So I could not agree anymore.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I feel like we've talked a long time about that topic, but I do want to also mention that obviously as kids get involved, it can get a little bit crazier. I would say Eric and I had a conversation pretty early on. Was this in premarital counseling or early on before we had kids, where we talked about how we really didn't want to let our kids define us? How did you word it? I felt like you did a good job with it, where you were like, I want our kids to come alongside in our life versus them running our life.
I think basically what I had said before we got married was I want to make it a priority where our relationship is a priority and our kids, I don't want to say they're not a priority, but that we make it well known that our marriage is the number one priority, and that's going to take precedent over a lot of things. A lot of times that'll come in play of activities or other things, commitments that they may want to do.
Yeah. So, and I will backtrack because I know you meant this. I would say our priorities are, the Lord each other and then our kids and immediate family. And then I think it's really important. We actually were having this conversation recently that we took a covenant before God to protect our marriage and our kids. Like that's our God-given duty. And so the friendships are amazing and they're great community. And like God has called us to live in community with, the church, but that's not who we took our covenant with. So I always have to think back to like prioritizing you and I above like kids' schedules dictating everything. And so one thing, my parents made me do this growing up. I don't know if you're the same way, but we could choose one sport at a time. That was like a hard and fast rule because if you have 2 or 3 kids and you allow them to do 2 or 3 different activities, they're running your schedule. It's not you like deciding that the day's not going to run you. The day just kind of does run you. And I think there's so much to be said, like Beth said earlier in this episode, about having free time and allowing your kids and you and your spouse to use imagination to play and be entertained and not just running constantly to the ball field or what have you. So,
yeah, I think that's one thing that I've seen as school has started back up with some of my coworkers and just in general, even with us as well, too. It's very important to talk about activities with the kids and figuring out what is really important because, we do see, or I see, they can be very easy to get out of balance. And, one of the things that I think about is family dinners, Now, that's not going to happen every single night, but we want to make it a priority to sit around the kitchen table, the island, have dinner at least, 4 to 5 times per week, I would say. And that's an important time for us as a family, just to be present with one another, to actually have that opportunity to talk. And
Eric's been good about calling me out about not having my phone at the dinner table. In the beginning, I'll be like, oh, I want to get a picture of this food, which now if I do have to get a picture of the food for Instagram or a campaign or whatever, I take the picture and then we put the phones away. It's a no phone zone.
For sure. Try and get rid of all those distractions. And yeah, just facilitate conversation, just like we do in the Marriage Corner, where I'll ask you random questions. We encourage our kids to ask random questions, and we'll ask random questions to them. And usually it makes for a fun dinner time in between trying to get the kids to eat, take another bite of food, and stay in their seats.
It's not too spicy. You don't have to go to the bathroom.
All of those other fun things. But it's a really great family time.
It is. And Layton even practices sight words or Bible verses or whatever. So anyway, okay, cool. Well, I hope that answered your question. We probably talked a little bit more than you even thought we would about that question, but I really enjoyed the conversation, as always, Eric. So thanks for joining me again on the Marriage Corner. And you guys, please let us know what you thought about this. If you have any questions you want to submit for Eric and I to talk about, we would love to hear them. So leave us a review down below. Truly, ratings and reviews are what make this show reach new ears. And we just are excited to be on this journey with you guys in season 1 and are excited to see where we can go together as a community in the Healthy with Heather Brown space. So thank you for being part of our story. We love you guys. Have a great day. Oh, hey there. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to take a screenshot of your podcast app on your phone, post it to your Instagram stories, and tag me at Healthy with Heather Brown to let me know your favorite takeaway from this episode.